Okay, day 14 just wrapped in the Lindsay Clancy trial, and guess what? The Commonwealth just rested after 71 witnesses. Can you believe that? So today we're really getting in the defense's case because we heard from family members of Lindsay, her mom, her sister, as well as co-workers. But we did have to start the day with the last witness of the Commonwealth, which was Ian Whiffen, and he was a Cellbrite digital forensic expert. And he talked a lot about Lindsay's Apple Watch. So he got a warrant to search her digital evidence basically all of January, but on the actual day of the incident, which was January 24th, the highest her heart rate went was 123 beats per minute. Now that was earlier in the day around noon. I'll show a screenshot right here. Okay, so the ones highlighted in green are when her heart rate jumps up. Now this one is at a little after 8 a.m., which would be after Cora's doctor's appointment. And then we have one around lunchtime at 11:43. Okay, but now the expert Ian here, he's gonna walk us through really minute by minute that evening. So data shows that flight of stairs were climbed on either her watch or her iPhone. It could be either or, between 5:33 p.m. and 5:38 p.m. Now, in between that is when she called Patrick back at 5:34 p.m. on January 24th. So the last flight that was climbed, it doesn't necessarily mean it takes 5 hours to climb, but the device was just catching up to recognizing that data. Then he shows that her phone was actually locked at 5:16 p.m. and not unlocked again. And so they asked, okay, well, how were calls made around 5:30? And then he just describes how Apple allows the users to call a missed call from the Apple Watch directly. So on cross-examination, we learn that on January 25th, so the day after the incident, around 7 and 8 a.m., Lindsay's device, health data, shows that she walked 134 steps, and the witnesses agreed that, yeah, it did move, but they cannot tell whether it was the Apple Watch or the iPhone. So then the witness is excused and the prosecution rests. Now, this is when Reddington gets up when the jury's excused and talks about a motion that he filed where he would argue that the defendant, now that we've heard all the evidence, should be declared not guilty. And if not, then Reddington just argued that the judge should reduce her charges to second-degree murder. And ultimately, the judge denies that motion. Okay, so defense's first witness, we had Margaret Hamp, which was a coworker of Lindsay's that worked at the labor and delivery on the night shift. Now, she just talked about how good of a mother she thought Lindsay was and how she had checked the monitors often. And there was one point when Cora was about 6 months old that she checked and saw that Cora was crying, and that she didn't like when she was crying. She just wasn't at that point to let Cora cry for a very long time. And so she tried to call Pat, was not able to get through to him. And so when he didn't respond, she actually called the police for a well check on her home to make sure everyone is okay. Everyone ended up being all right. Then she recalls a time when Lindsay was first hired onto the staff, and she said that Lindsay told her about a case that was reminding her of a patient that they were caring for at that time, because a patient came in pregnant wanting to harm herself or had thoughts about that. And Lindsay started to cry and said that she had heard about the Andrea Yates case and how she just didn't know how a mother could hurt her children after hearing about the story. And Lindsay at this point looks visibly upset, dabbing her eyes with tissue. So the next witness was Allison, which is Lindsay Clancy's sister. Now, they haven't lived in the same state for many years, but they have kept in close contact just through, phone and visiting. And she noticed that Lindsay's mental health was deteriorating through Thanksgiving when she saw her. And she also had talked about how her symptoms were getting worse. And then I guess that she ended up communicating with Pat separately at this time just to check in on Lindsay. And Lindsay ended up telling her sister that she had a terrible reaction to Zoloft and that her mental health was getting really bad towards the end of December, and that she actually confided in her that she did have some self-harming thoughts. And she did see her at Cora's birthday, and she said that Lindsay just looked really tired. And then she testified that after the incident, she rushed over to the hospital but was not able to actually see or talk to Lindsay for 2 weeks. Then she testified that her parents have been living out of a hotel for the last 3 years, visiting Lindsay every single day. So, speaking of her parents, next on the stand was her mother, Paula. So, she has been there every day listening to the trial. And she just talks about how Lindsay was such a good kid growing up and she was an excellent student. She never got in trouble with the law, tells the jury how she felt about her grandchildren and how she just got emotional, honestly, talking about how much she loved them and how a person can't know what it's like to love a grandchild until you have one. It was honestly really sad to witness. And then she's asked, at one point, did you become aware of the mental health issues that Lindsay was struggling with? And she said, yeah, about mid-October, she told me that through a text. And then she asked if her mom could actually come and stay with her for a bit. So she texted her and said, I'm really sick. Something is wrong. I have horrible insomnia. I don't know how to get through this, and I don't want to be alone. And then she stays on and off with Lindsay from basically October until December. She says that one memory in particular was of concern when she asked her mother if she could sleep with her in the same bed. And that was about late December. And so she ultimately didn't specify why she wanted to. But then she was with her most of December, and then she left on Christmas Eve. And so we find out that she was actually the one that was helping Patrick while Lindsay checked herself in on that New Year's Eve until she was checked out for Cora's birthday party. Then she's asked of anything that Lindsay said in regards to the medication, and her mom said, quote, that she couldn't remember anything and the medications was pretty much just destroying her mind and that it wasn't her. She said that she wanted to just enjoy her kids again. And then she was asked if she recalled a moment in the kitchen with Patrick and Lindsay when Lindsay said that she was hesitant to tell them, but that she was having thoughts of harming the children. So then Kevin sits down. And then now it's cross. So then the Commonwealth asked her, okay, when you heard that, did you ask Lindsay what she had meant about that? And her mother said, yeah, well, Patrick asked her and she seemed like she was okay and that we were both there with her, so we didn't see any concern or have any consideration to checking her into a hospital. Then they go over their text messages, their daily text messages, and confirms that she did check in on her daughter daily to see how she was sleeping, how she was feeling. So they talk about that text message that she sent Lindsay 2 days before, so the 22nd, about how she says, like, I'm so glad that you're doing better. And her mom describes how it was actually just a text message of encouragement, that she hadn't actually visibly seen Lindsay doing better, but that she was just kind of like grasping at any sort of positivity to hopefully help her daughter. Next, we had an expert witness of the defense, an ER doctor, and he had described that Clancy was at a GCS of 10. That's basically like the Glasgow scale, and a standard point, it's like a standard 15 points. So she was pretty high, not responding. He talked about how her body temperature was low of 82 and how the cuts that he had observed in the photos were consistent with self-injurious behavior. So the intent, he can't really gauge. Then he talks about how Lindsay suffered a cardiac arrest after being transferred and had to get a blood transfusion when suffering a hemorrhage around her spine. Ended up going code blue when they transferred her from the first hospital to the second hospital.